Okay, in this video we're going to be exploring the polar regions, their characteristics, where they're found on Earth, and why perhaps they are particularly vulnerable environments and what that means for these environments going forward into the future. Firstly, we need to look at where these polar regions are. From the map we can see quite clearly that they are defined as the areas which are above, or so north of the 66-degree north latitude line, or the area south of the 66 degrees south line of latitude. Those two lines of latitude, 66 degrees north and 66 degrees south, have other names. Up here we have the Arctic Circle, and down here we have the Antarctic Circle. So that's where we find our polar regions, and jot that down on your maps just so that you're happy where those two regions lie. We need to understand that there are key differences between the North Pole and the South Pole. I'm going to refer to the South Polar region as the Antarctic or Antarctica, and as the North Polar region I'm going to refer to that as the Arctic. So, the first key difference is that Antarctica in the south is a continental land mass. As we can see down here, it's a land mass on which ice is situated. It even has an active volcano called Mount Erebus. So that is a continental landmass. Conversely, or in the Arctic, around the North Pole, we don't have any land. Okay, it is just an area of frozen sea, and that is the key difference between the two poles. Now, that's not to say that there isn't land within the Arctic Circle. So within the Arctic Circle, we do have large amounts of land. Parts of northern Russia, parts of northern Scandinavia, parts of Greenland, and northern Canada, all within the Arctic Circle. Conversely, in the southern hemisphere, in Antarctica, we also have large areas of sea within the Antarctic Circle. So the key difference is at the poles themselves. In the northern hemisphere we just have frozen sea, in the southern hemisphere we have an actual land mass. Secondly, the climate. The climate in Antarctica is much colder, harsher, and there are larger volumes of ice on the land. We'll look at that later. It's known as the Antarctic ice sheet. So the climate in the southern hemisphere in Antarctica is much harsher. It's colder, stronger winds, etc. Thirdly, the ice. I just mentioned that a second ago, but the ice we find in Antarctica is more extensive. We've got the Antarctic ice sheet, which covers a much larger area, is thicker, and so on, than the ice which is in the Arctic region, which is that on Greenland. We also, of course, get sea ice, but principally we have much more ice in the southern hemisphere. And finally, human habitation. We see that in the Arctic we actually have indigenous tribes inhabiting the polar region, Eskimos, nomadic herders, and so on. In Antarctica it is uninhabited except for scientists living and working from various countries' research bases. Key characteristics. In both zones, in both regions, they are characterized by having extremely harsh environments covered in ice. Slight different type of ice, so we have more sea ice at the North Pole rather than land ice in the South Pole, but ice is the key characteristic in both landscapes. Both polar regions have long winters and very, very short summers. They both suffer from extreme temperatures, but as I mentioned earlier, the temperatures become more extreme on Antarctica. Can be as low as below minus 50 degrees Celsius. Both areas are very sensitive to global temperature changes, and so they are both under threat from global warming. And this is largely to do with the rises in temperature causing the melting of ice. They are both areas where natural resources are thought to be abundant, so oil, gas, mineral deposits and so on. But they're both incredibly fragile environments, easily damaged by humans and pollution. Now, just to expand on what I meant by short summers and very, very long winters, if we just take, for example, this area of this northern polar region, 3 points on the map: Reykjavik in Iceland, Russia, Murmansk, and Alert in Canada. Each are slightly closer to the North Pole, as signified by the increasing latitudes. Now, if we look at the graphs, we can see that at Alert, which is closest to the North Pole, that's Alert down here, that pin, we can see that there are approximately 4.5 months of complete darkness. Okay, so 4.5 months over the winter months in the Northern Hemisphere, it's completely dark. However, conversely, we have the sun at midnight for about 5 months of the year, from April to the end of August. And so therefore we have complete daylight for 5 months across the summer. Of course, in the Southern Hemisphere, that situation is reversed, and we have darkness in the months from April to August, and 24 hours of light from about late October till February time. Now, as I've mentioned before, ice characterises both polar regions, but there are subtle differences between the two. At the North Pole, so just off the map up here at the North Pole, we have frozen sea ice, which is normally on average a few meters thick. There is ice within the Arctic Circle, and that is the ice on Greenland, which is this area here, and that's the Greenland ice sheet. And in places, that is up to 3 kilometers in thickness. So there is still a large volume of ice in the northern polar region. It's the second largest ice sheet in the world after that found in Antarctica. Now, at the South Pole, we effectively have 2 ice sheets. We have the East Antarctic ice sheet and the West Antarctic ice sheet. And they together account for the largest extent of ice on Earth. They cover 98% of the Antarctic landmass, and in places it's up to several kilometers thick. And ice is a key feature in both landscapes because ice moves, and ice is an incredibly powerful tool with which the landscape is carved. It can move up to 40 meters per day. Now, on the diagram here, we can also see that ice extends out over the sea to give us what are known as ice shelves. Okay, so they're known as ice shelves. And this is simply where the ice sheet extends out over the sea and the ice floats, being less dense than the water. And it's from these ice shelves that we get carving of icebergs, which then float off out to sea. Now, not all of Antarctica is actually ice 100% of the time. We can see in this picture down here, this is from the very northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. So this is the Antarctic Peninsula. In the summer months, i.e. from November to about January, February time, the ice does melt on the Antarctic Peninsula, and we get some growth of mosses and lichens. So there is a tiny bit of greenery there. Okay, now I want to talk about a landscape or a biome which is very linked to our polar regions, and that's the area of tundra. Now, tundra is principally found in the northern hemisphere, and it's denoted by this area here, the orange zone. We can see that it is found in the very far northern areas of Russia, of Scandinavia, of Canada, of Alaska, and around the fringes of Greenland that are ice-free, and also in, or rather on Iceland. It's also found, on this map here, Antarctica should be down here, it's also found on the Antarctic Peninsula, okay, tundra-like biome. And the tundra is very closely linked to our polar regions, as I've mentioned. It's an area where we have what's called permafrost, so permafrost. And permafrost is ground that is permanently frozen for more than 2 consecutive winters. So permafrost, permanently frozen ground, where the ground is frozen for more than 2 consecutive winters. The tundra is characterised by this permafrost. It's a barren, treeless plain, so we only get low shrubs and mosses and lichens growing. The snow and the ice retreat during the summer months, so there is some melting of the top layers of soil, and that results in waterlogging and the formation of lakes and bogs in this biome. Also in this biome, we tend to find some large mammals, particularly in the northern hemisphere. We get caribou or reindeer, Arctic foxes and rabbits. In the southern hemisphere, there are far fewer mammals and they're much smaller. We tend to find only penguins and seals, and that reflects the degree of isolation of the Antarctic continent from other land masses. Here are some photos of tundra regions, flat, barren, treeless plains. In both pictures, we can see evidence of waterlogging, suggesting that this is probably taken in the summer months when the top layers of soil have melted. But the tundra is an incredibly vulnerable environment, or a vulnerable biome. It's vulnerable to exploitation. Areas of the tundra, particularly in northern Russia, in Canada and Alaska, are rich in oil, gas and mineral deposits, and they have been exploited over the last century. These areas, like the polar regions, are also very vulnerable to climate change. The permafrost is incredibly sensitive to rising temperatures, and melting permafrost can have a vast impact both on the landscape, and it has the potential to release large volumes of methane, which is trapped below the surface. And this methane is a very active greenhouse gas, and this has the potential then to speed up global warming further and cause even more rapid melting of the permafrost. So, a very quick rundown there of our polar regions. The Arctic, Antarctica. I've also covered the tundra. And what I'd like you to do is make sure that you've noted the key points from that on your worksheets, so you've got that information to refer back to as and when you need it.